Good morning, guys. A real pleasure to have Paul Greenberg and Brent Leary. You know, these two guys are world-famous CRM analysts who run a wildly popular CRM players video cast. God knows what, 3 times a week now? It's so popular you have to increase the frequency. But today we're not going to talk so much about CRM. We may kind of divert into that, but we're going to talk about their other passion, sports, because, clearly most of us have been watching a whole bunch of replays and God knows what else. We're eager for some fresh news. So Paul, Brent, welcome. Introduce yourself and tell us about your sports passion.
Hey, Brent, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, well, our show really got popular last week when Vinnie was on it. So,
so we have to add a fourth show.
Flattery will get you far, Brent.
No, this is great. First of all, thanks for having us. So, yeah, I'm here in Atlanta. Gosh, I've been in the CRM area for, I guess, 2 decades at this point. But I've been a Los Angeles Rams fan for more than twice that, basically, ever since I was a little kid. Saw the horns on the TV on a Sunday afternoon, and that was it for me, even though I lived in Delaware.
Vince Ferragamo, right?
So at the time, this is actually before Vince Ferragamo. This is James Harris. That's how far back I go. That's like the early 70s. But anyway, yeah. So I've been a huge sports fan. I love the Sixers growing up. Dr. J was my guy when I was growing up. Love the Phillies, although I'm not really a Phillies fan anymore. But Gary Maddox was my guy, and Steve Carlton was my guy until I got a little older and found out a little bit more about Steve Carlton, but that's besides the point. And then, although I was never a hockey fan, I grew up in Philadelphia where they were completely crazy about the Flyers. So, I have a lot of love with all the different sports. But yeah. This guy right here, that's where it really goes.
Okay, but I'm glad you had that on. Paul, I know you're a Yankees fan, but I'm sure you're not just a Yankees fan.
Well, no, I mean, see, here's the thing. I'm born and raised in New York, okay? Even I live in Manassas, Virginia right now, which is clearly not New York, but I'm born and raised in New York, so I'm a New York sports fan. Now, unlike
Jets or Giants?
Well, think of this. My company is called the 56 Group, and it's been in business for, 18 years, right? And again, my focus, like Brent's, has always been CRM, even preceding the foundation of the 56 Group. I've written books on it. I've done all this other stuff. But it took a while for us to try to come up with a name for the company. And the way we came up with it, my brother and I were just talking one day and said, I don't know, what should I name it after? He said, and he's like me with the Yankees. He said, well, we should probably figure out something around the Yankees. I said, good idea. So this is 1956, right? The 56 Group. 1956, I was 6 years old. First time I ever watched the Yankee game. But same year, Mickey Mantle won the Triple Crown, and Don Larson pitched a perfect game in the World Series, which we won handily as a result. And so it was like the epitome of achievement in baseball on the batter and the pitcher side in 1 year. And the first year I happened to watch baseball. So what better name? And I had this pitch in the very beginning of my company where I would talk about the epitome of achievement on it, and I never even used it. I literally threw it out. But it was all based around perfect game Larson and Triple Crown Mickey Mantle, who was my hero growing up. But I love New York sports. I will say one thing, though. Younger generations, it's like the Mets versus the Yankees, the Rangers versus the Islanders, the Knicks and so on. But they're nuts. You root for your city, man. You're not just rooting for your team. You're rooting for your city. So you root for the team.
That's a cop out, Paul.
Sorry, I don't root for the Mets, but I don't root against them. I mean,
all right. So guys, I read somewhere that not since Second World War has sports been so affected as it has in the last 3 or 4 months. The Tokyo Olympics have been postponed a year. The drafts went to visual. My God, you talk about taking the fun out of the draft. I've been watching 30 for 30, Lance Armstrong, and
Wow, you're down to Lance Armstrong. You really are definitely.
Michael Jordan, Last Dance.
Yeah.
And here's the big disappointment, right? My city has the GOAT. Tom Brady has just arrived in Tampa. The Gronk is here. And I feel guilty. We haven't even given them a proper welcome. So it just
we're very happy.
Yeah, I got a proper welcome for them. Of course, I'm not a big fan of the Pats, so any of those guys,
proper welcome can't be on this show because it'd be something else.
But I'm not a huge sports fan compared to you. How have you coped? I mean, it must have been a miserable last 3 months.
Well, I'll tell you something funny about that. So, my main sport is baseball, but I follow all the teams and all the leagues and love all sports generally. But two things have happened. Number one is with baseball in particular, because they basically are spending their time right now, see these billionaire owners fighting with millionaire players over their money, not even over what happened like during 9/11 when baseball was really an instrumental part in getting America back to some sense of self, and actually took themselves that way too, thought about themselves that way. This is a bunch of what looks like just basically greedy bastards fighting back and forth over money at a time when people really could use the kind of lift me up it gives. And so and the other side of it is at best we're going to get on the baseball side a 65 game season at best. 70 just got rejected this morning by unequivocally,
really?
Unequivocally by the commissioner and the owners. The players won't take 60. Somebody's thinking they're going to come up with 63 or 65, some of the other commentators. But ultimately just outright rejected. And then you know what I think? I think, well, basically, I won't curse, but, F you, right? When it comes to baseball, right? I don't even, what's a 65 game season mean anyway? Not much, right? So I'm basically watching the same thing I'm watching when I watch classic games on, I'm there. I know the only difference, I know the outcome of the classic games is usually the ones I'm watching. Good outcome.
Well, what you're pointing to is, it's not, things are going, you may not like it, but somebody somewhere is doing things, right? One of the things in all the interviews I've seen is when I assume an industry is dead and I talk to an executive, it just seems like the last 3 months, there's been a flurry of downsizing, downscaling, the volumes, the acrobatics are the reverse direction, but a lot is going on. So in sports, even though baseball may come back, not that exciting, they're not sitting around, right? Brent, what are you seeing that, in the sports that you follow that are, they're not sitting around, right? What are they doing?
Hey, one of the more interesting things that's going on, I don't know if you've been looking at what's happening with the NBA, but the NBA and the Players Union, they seem to be, I think, possibly the best relationship in the professional teams between the union and the ownership. I think Adam Silver, and I can't remember the lady who's running the NBA Players Association, but they seem to be able to work pretty well together. And they were pretty close to, I think, announcing, getting back, rebooting the rest of the season. And they're going to have I think it's going to be like some kind of bubble over the city of Orlando where all the games are going to be played in one place. And they were going to basically create this safe zone. And, once you come in, you can't come out until it's over. And it seemed like they were pretty close to being able to agree with on that. But a group of the players led by Kyrie Irving and I forget the other guy.
Was Dwight?
No, well, Dwight Howard has been saying stuff, but it's another guy that is working with Kyrie. I can see him. He used to play with the Boston Celtics. But anyway, they gathered a group of players to say, hey, you know what? We're not sure we're going to be willing to do this yet because we don't know exactly, how safe is this, and when you say we're going to have to stay in a bubble and you're going to have to be quarantined, we're not sure we're up for that. So even though, the union head and the league had kind of agreed on games and how many games and how much money, the players themselves said, hey, let's take a step back and, give us more detail about how our lives are actually going to be when we get down there and have to stay down there until the end of the season. So that's kind of interesting to see how players are seem to be seizing a bit more power, even though the union and the union head and the owners and Adam Silver, they seem to have things kind of working, but this group of players are like, wait a minute, we don't know enough about this yet, and we're the ones that are going to have to play and be in that bubble.
Isn't hockey close to announcing a playoff, and are they further along?
Well, the thing with them is they've kept the lowest profile of all the leagues, but they've also probably been, I would say, the least controversial and difficult, right? Meaning they've had less controversy and less difficulty communicating with the players. I mean, part of that is because it's probably, nobody, look, in sports, none of these guys are underpaid by comparison to the actual human world. But they're the least, they're kind of lowest paid relative to the other leagues. And I think the highest paid player is actually sitting on our old friend Jonathan Becker's team, the San Jose Sharks. I can't remember either the name of the player or what he's getting, but that's actually the NFL. The NHL's problem, right? It's hard to remember who the hell's there other than Alex Ovechkin, right? So, I think they're pretty much have had not a smooth sailing, but pretty smooth ride to it. The other league that's doing very well, it looks like, is the MLS, right? Major League Soccer. Charlie Shin, who's the VP of fan engagement and now I think is business analytics and strategy for the MLS, is also, to me, one of the most innovative and smartest minds in the entire sports world. Told us on the CRM Playoffs Happy Hour on Wednesday that they've decided the way they're going to kind of handle the season is more like if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Brent, it was more like a NCAA March Madness approach, right? Which is a sort of a round robin set of playoff with all the teams, and then move on to the ultimate champion. So they're coming up with something that's relatively innovative, and given the world of soccer, probably be pretty well accepted because people are used to those kind of tournaments in the soccer world. So there's some good innovation. Now you take the NFL though, so there's an interesting. I think they're in a certain way the single most interesting case. Look, baseball is clear. They're basically blackening both their eyes, and when the third eye emerges, and Freemasonry takes over, they'll blacken that eye, right? So, they're just like, I've never seen a league do worse. Okay, my favorite sport is pretty much getting me pretty angry at my favorite sport.
You're being a little tough. You're being a little too tough on them, aren't you?
No, I'm not. No, I'm
not at all.
It doesn't change my love of the Yankees, believe me. So, but the NFL. So here's the reason they're interesting, and this is really interesting. So you look at them; they've responded, around the whole George Floyd murder and the mea culpas that are going on universally around it, because most of it's just mea culpas. Everyone has to make a statement, so they're making a statement. The real question is, what actions are you taking, right? So the NFL says, all right, well, we'll give you a $250 million fund to do this, right? To deal with issues around diversity and inclusion and so on and so forth, and racism. But they still haven't apologized to Colin Kaepernick, right? So, and they were the ones who kind of triggered this whole thing by being complete jackasses about it. So their past behavior is weighing heavily on how much you trust their current behavior, right?
Well, I think their past behavior is like you said, Colin Kaepernick started this, 2016? And, once the current resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue grabbed a hold of it, he basically threatened the owners to keep this guy out, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so fast forward to 2020, Roger Goodell has said a lot of, finally saying the right things. But the one thing he hasn't done or said was any kind of acknowledgement that Colin Kaepernick was right. So even, it's, you're never going to turn down money because you can do a lot of good things with the money, but it seems a bit hollow when you can't say, I'm sorry. We wish we had listened to you before. Just acknowledge the fact that the guy was right and you were wrong.
Brent, have you heard rumors that they've been on the quiet telling teams, give Colin a chance?
It's not even on the quiet. Roger Goodell has said it publicly. And I mean, I just saw something which
that was yesterday.
Happened. Yeah. If I see, they're the coach of the Eagles. Now, I know what kind of, growing up about 30 minutes from Philadelphia, I know a lot about the Philadelphia Eagle fans. And there's some hardcore dudes. And Doug Peterson, the head coach of the Eagles, said, we're open to it. We're interested. I just have a hard time thinking that the Philadelphia fans would be open for Colin Kaepernick to be there. I'll just leave it at that.
And in fairness, 4 years down, as a quarterback, he's age 2, and so it probably have to be a backup role or whatever, right?
Yeah, he was actually kind of on the decline before he left. He came out blazing saddles when he took over for Alex Smith. And at the end of that year, they went to the Super Bowl, and he was a big part of them getting to the Super Bowl. But I think, as in baseball, once the first time around, you do well, and then the pitchers figure out, and then you can't get a hit. That was happening to him before he left the scene. So he was kind of on the decline. 4 years later, at best, I'm saying he's going to be a backup at best.
Right now, they pretty much – it's almost to the state that they might as well just give him reparations, man. It's just, well.
I would say first apologize to the guy.
Exactly. Goodell's statement was not an apology. It said, well, yeah, someone should give him a job.
Talking about reparations, let's talk about revenue models. NASCAR is back, but there are no fans, right? Do you think we're going to move to a digital model instead of season tickets, more exclusive subscriptions? Look ahead to the new world.
I think they'll look more digitally than even now, and they've actually, and Brent and I know this from being with SEAT, the Sports Entertainment Alliance Technology, for the last 8 years. We've seen a lot of the digital initiatives that the teams are putting out there, and they all were moving in that direction without any question. I think I'm not saying this isn't accelerating digital transformation, but accelerating an increase in the use of digital tools and capabilities. Doesn't mean their cultures are going to change dramatically. But look, some sports like baseball and others, the experience at the stadium is critical to it. It's not where at the NFL side, the chief competition they had before all this hit was being home and watching the game, right? As opposed to going to the stadium competition. Stadium attendance is terrible, and it's not worth it. And so it varies from sport to sport, I think, in terms of how much you really need to be there. But certain sports like baseball are reliant on live attendance. But also, the other side is, look, I watch lots of sports on television. Okay, I'm not there. But the crowd's part of what I'm watching. Okay, even though it's the game, it's not like it's the ambient experience of what I'm watching, even on TV.
Wait a minute, did you just say ambient experience?
Yeah. Trying to give Ray a plug.
That was allowed.
Trying to give Ray a plug.
Come on.
Right.
Usually,
the irony is that what I just said is actually an ambient experience as opposed to what we did, right? So, but
let me ask you this though. Digital, whatever they did the last 2 years, they weren't competing with too much digital right now, right? People are on Zoom, people are telemedicine, teleeducation. It's almost digital overload. So how will digital sports play in that world? Will it still dominate, get to the top just because it's so exciting? Or will they have to be a little more respectful of bandwidth limitations?
Well, I can talk about it from a standpoint of what's happened in the world of DJing because because people haven't been going to big concerts or big parties. DJs who, some of those guys are, making $10, $15, $20,000 at an event. They didn't have a place to do their thing. So they took to digital DJing and broadcasting and streaming. And I don't know if you saw, like at the beginning of the COVID crisis, there's a guy named D Nice, and he's old school hip hop guy from the 80s. And now he's like a DJ. And so he was like one of the first guys who said, let me just start live streaming my DJing stuff. And I think at one point he had over 130,000 people on his stream, and like famous people were shouting them out and, telling people to check it out. And that drove all these other like bedroom DJs, kind of folks like me, to get into, get on Twitch and start streaming. And then you couldn't buy any video equipment because everybody was trying to get theirs. And so it went from, a star kind of doing it to everyday Joe's kind of doing it, because they didn't just want to watch him. They wanted to be him to a certain extent. And so that kind of, you saw it with gaming, and then you saw it with DJing, and then with Zoom just brought it to the masses. So I think it broadens the appeal, and it also kind of, if you want to stand out, you're going to have to continually improve. And I think that's kind of what's been interesting with, what's going on with the, with the crisis, is that it's accelerated digital transformation, not necessarily just at the enterprise level, but for people in their houses. I mean, you're seeing a much bigger thing.
Your point is digital sports should not have to worry about other competition. By the way, I should have at the beginning when I introduced these guys are polymaths. Brent is also a damn good DJ. And Paul has all kinds of other art and stamps and coins and single malts. And these guys are into all kinds of stuff. But Brent, is your point that digital sports will not have a problem with the bandwidth?
No, well, I don't know if it'll have a problem with the bandwidth. I think.
I mean, bandwidth and mental bandwidth or visual.
Oh, no, because I think, and remember, Paul, was that last year or 2 years ago when we were down at Daytona and we were talking with Charlie?
Last year.
What I think sports leagues are finding, and MLS is a great example, is that people, at least the younger generations, they don't just want to watch; they want to be a part of it. And I think esports and being able to find ways to integrate your audience into not just a passive watch, but actually feeling like they're a part of it, that it deepens the relationship that you could potentially have with your customers.
And so fantasy teams, fantasy football.
Even more than that, Joe. Even more than that. I mean, the thing is that there's two different levels. So one is, and this is probably the CRM-ish part, right? One thing that Charlie was talking about that they actually did is they had, this is now a couple of years old, but they had signed a contract with EA Sports, which of course produces the FIFA games, right? And the concept was kind of like this. There's the people who go to MLS games tend to be the generations that play FIFA. And consequently, they like everything else. They have their teams and they play the MLS when they play FIFA. So they have the players that they love and so on and so forth. And there's all kinds of, and in FIFA, of course, you're being a coach or you're actively participating in moving, players to the arcade style.
Yeah.
But one way or the other, you're exhibiting certain likes, dislikes, and so on. So, for example, you have a formation you particularly like at a particular point in a game, right? And that's going to be captured and recorded one way or the other. Or you have these 5 players are obviously the ones that you really have been putting a lot of time and effort into, literally be the ones you manipulate, so to speak, on the field. So that data is captured. Then at the game, of course, in the stadiums, they have sensors, they have all the other things, they have mobile apps and so on, and that's capturing a different kind of data. The idea effectively is data, both agglomeration, a data agglomeration, but also a data exchange, right? So that when you're at a game, they're going to know not only his you profile at the game, who your favorite players are, what the formations you like are, and they're going to start sending highly personalized messages to you based on your FIFA data as well as your game data. On the other side of it, they also know that at the game, you every time you go to a game, you buy this, and this. So those ads are going to appear in the stadiums at FIFA, right? When you're playing, right? Things like that. I mean, that's, not the only things, but the idea is that deep integration between you, in the world, your own bubble and own world, of FIFA and soccer and MLS, and so you're building, you're running it here, you're watching it here, and the combination leads to this amazing level of personalized
integration of physical and digital.
Yeah, it's amazing. But again, that's still the innovative edge, right? So it's not the core of all the teams, but of all the leagues either. And but you look at baseball, MLB at Bat, the app alone. I mean, look at that app. I remember years ago, and it's way better now than it was. Years ago, somebody asked me, so what's the apps you would be one, if you had to take one app to a desert island, what would it be? And I said, MLB at Bat. That would be it. And the data you get as a student of the game and the information you get at your fingertips quickly allows you to literally participate more, right? Just by the fact that you're then making choices that are defined and captured by your use of the app itself. It's a phenomenal thing, and obviously ultimately they're selling stuff. So
so where does virtual reality?
It's not quite that, but yeah. That right now those tend to be like, I think, is it Turner Field, Brent, that has that virtual reality place for kids?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, things like that's what that is right now as far as virtual reality in sports go.
Yeah, but you know what? It doesn't even have to be as deep as that. A lot of these teams, they only recognize you as a customer / fan if they're able to sell you a season ticket, or if they're able to do certain things around you being close to the location of where the ballpark or the arena is. And like for a guy like me, I'm 3,000 miles away from my team. So I'm not a season ticket holder. I'm never going to be a season ticket holder. And to a certain extent, they don't look at me as a fan of the team because I'm not buying, season tickets. But everywhere I go, I'm like a walking spokesperson, unpaid spokesperson for the Rams. I mean, I got, I don't know, like 30 different Ram hats. But see, that's bought through a third party. That's not a directly, the team doesn't know that because they don't get that level data about people. So they don't view me as a real Rams fan, which this digital transformation has an opportunity. If they think a little bit outside the box, they should be able to figure out ways to capitalize on I am a real fan. And you can, I would pay certain kinds of money to get certain access to, data and video and content. I'm just not going to be able to do, pay X amount of money for a season ticket. So this is an opportunity, I think, for these folks to really, think outside the box and use the form of digital transformation and not just digital transition, making your operations more efficient. Yeah, that's great. But that doesn't make them see me as somebody that's really important to their company. But if they're able to leverage some of this stuff that we're talking about, they would be able to actually do that.
Maybe the American sports will benefit from looking at a couple of international sports. I was at the Cricket World Cup in London last year, and it's phenomenal how global that sport has become and how much digital streaming goes on in cricket. I mean, they're fanatical. India is fanatical about cricket, and most of them have streaming of sports from all over the world. I mean, they just can't afford to travel as much, right? Just like you're saying. And the same thing with European soccer. I mean, you go to any English pub in the US, right? And they're streaming on their TV, European, English soccer teams and so on. So, what your point about distance, shortening the distance digitally might be a huge opportunity even for American sports. Yeah.
I'll tell you though, I still don't get cricket.
That's another matter. That's
I
another.
even read Cricket for Americans, and I still didn't get it.
Well, it's funny. So I was in Manchester for one of the cricket matches, and all these Pakistani fans and West Indian fans are around me, and I'm asking questions like, "Who is that guy? And why are they doing this?" They're looking at me like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And I'm asking baseball questions. But hey, the point is we can learn from the different sports. Let's talk about data, right? We're all data fanatics, right? Sports fans tend to be, all kinds of ERA this and acronym that. What will this season do to all the stats? I mean, it's a one big asterisk, or are we going to see some new stats come out of this? New digital, acronyms come out of this?
As far as new stats, that's hard to really see. I guess I see basically just sort of lesser numbers associated with existing stats. I don't. It's a lost season, regardless of what it is. And the things that's going to even make it more interestingly lost when it comes to data and stats is the formats are being changed. I mean, ultimately, this thing is being driven around revenue. Obviously, everything. Right? They're just trying to recover some revenue that they pretty well have otherwise lost. And consequently, all the stats we've ever had are not really a matter of the purity and soul of the games, which is like, the fight over Roger Maris really breaking Babe Ruth's record, right? Or something like that. It's over the revenue. So they're not, to me, I'll put it this way. In 65 games or whatever, or in how the NFL may run a whole season without fans. Who knows, right? And if they do, the stats will be as legitimate as any other season. It's ultimately the amount of games you spend, of the percentage of the full season you play, right? And the actual full season versus a playoff format instead of. And from my standpoint, I don't think that much is going to change. I don't know. There may be other stats that are possible, but I don't know what they would be.
Let me ask Brent, if you move to that distance fan audience, do you see any new stats being of interest? Or any new nuggets, any new...
Most people who quit leagues in disgust.
I keep distinct the esports stuff because I am not as interested in that. I'm in the real world when it comes to the stats and sports and stuff like that. So I'm a bit harder on this kind of stuff because, I love stats. I love knowing the fact that my favorite football player of all time, 2105, that the most rushing yards in a season, 248, the most rushing yards in a playoff game, 1808, most yards in a rookie season. I mean, those things stay with you. I mean, at least they stay with me, and they mean a lot to us real traditional sports guys. I don't play fantasy because I don't care about fantasy stuff. That doesn't happen on the field, but I recognize there's a larger group of people who are just as interested in, the fantasy as they are in the reality. And I think that's great for the sports teams to capitalize on. I don't know. There may be some new stuff that comes out of it, but I think it'll just be fleeting because hopefully this will be the only year like this, at least in the rest of our lifetimes.
So actually, to Brent's point, one of the interesting things that has occurred, although I'll call it interesting, but not super significant. So obviously, a lot of the rotisserie leagues and the draft leagues and all these other things that are out there have been badly hurt by all this. Football fantasy leagues and basketball fantasy leagues. And, and companies initially like DraftKings and others are just like, oh my God, right? Let's say the gambling part, right, kind of tends to sink down the tubes. So what they've been doing, well, two things have happened. On the level of DraftKings and the like, they've been running historic leagues, meaning you draft and do all the things you do, but they're using sports simulation games. I play them all the time. I have. The other thing I am, which to all the hobbies is I'm a big PC gamer, like a big one. I built my own machine over there, a 49-inch monitor. Right.
When do you get anything written? When do you do any work?
I have roughly a half of my SAP written is almost 1,600 words. Half. All right. So anyway, simulation game, PC action sports, Stratomatic baseball, but the PC game. There's dozens of them. I play pretty much all of them in all sports, and they're using these simulations to actually simulate outcomes of games, and people are actually like drafting accordingly because the draft function is built into the game. You can do all these kind of things. Major League Baseball ran an OOTP, that's out of the park baseball simulation, to see how the season was going to turn out, which is ridiculous because they're not that accurate, right? And then they're literally ridiculous, right? So, but the other side, which was just fun, even though it was ultimately stupid, is you're seeing professional players playing against each other with like RBI baseball, Madden 2020 or 2021 when it comes out, which by the way has Lamar Alexander on the cover, on the box. And which are fun to watch, I guess, but this is basically you're watching a 21-year-old kid play a game. That's it, right? So
think about that, though. Think about that, because the guy who has the most subscribers on YouTube, that PewDiePie guy, he's got like over 100 million subscribers. He started out as playing video games, and people subscribe to watch him play video games.
That's what Twitch is.
Well, that's how it all kind of got about. He became the number one person subscribed to on YouTube, 100 and something million, and it was from people wanting to watch him play different video games.
Yeah, now it's multi-billion-dollar sport.
This is we can go on and on and on. Maybe we should make this a weekly show.
You'll have your own.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks a lot.
That's what somebody just sent me. A virtual trade. Literally, as we were talking, a buddy of mine sent me this image about a mock trade, a virtual trade.
Who is it, though?
Jamal Adams for Zach Roots.
Gotta go, guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Say hi to Heidi. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.